Hello, my name is Lauren and welcome to the Theoretical YouTube channel and another episode of Book vs. Movie, where I procrastinate reading the actual assigned books for my English degree to make videos about movies based on things I like. You know, movie adaptations that are actually good and not bland at best or insulting at worst. Please let the Netflix School for Good and Evil turn out okay. But today we are taking a close look at one of the most quintessential fantasy book versus movie adaptations of all time, The Wizard of Oz. Or I guess The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, since that's the name of the book. And I'm pretty sure that was self-explanatory. On the other hand, we're looking at just the first novel in Frank L. Baum's famous Oz series, since that's the one that the movie is based on. And I haven't read the others. And with that, I think we are ready to begin round one of Book vs. Movie right after I roll this intro. Sorry about the interruption. Let's begin with round one, characters. And no one should be surprised since that is literally the first category in every single one of these videos. But characters! Well, they're all mostly the same. We've got Dorothy, the wide-eyed innocent girl from Kansas who is unwittingly whisked off to an unfamiliar fantasy land and is just trying to get back home.
Oh, but I want to go home now!
The Scarecrow with no brain, the Tin Man with no heart, and the Lion with no courage. The Good Witch Glinda, who's actually two characters in the book, the Wicked Witch of the West, and the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's not different enough to really compare between the two adaptations. I mean, maybe she's a little bit more proactive in the book, but not by much. The Tin Man's way more aggressive in the book, but it doesn't really impact the story in a significant way. And sure, the movie combined the Good Witch of the North with Glinda from the South, but the character fills exactly the same role. Send Dorothy along the yellow brick road to find the Wizard of Oz, and then let her know that her shoes could have taken her home the whole time.
All you do is follow the yellow brick road. You don't need to be helped any longer. You've always had the power to go back to Kansas.
Maybe this answers the question of why didn't Glinda just tell Dorothy how to get back to Kansas in the first place?
Then why didn't you tell her before?
Because she wouldn't have believed me.
Because she was literally a different character. But I also like how she bookends Dorothy's adventure. The Good Witch of the North never comes back in the book, so the movie gives a little bit more closure. The wizard's a bit scummier in the book. He still escapes Oz on a hot air balloon after he promised to take Dorothy with him back to Kansas. But he only might have done that on accident. Otherwise, he still pretends to be a wizard, but is really just a con man with an AV background. And he refuses to give the other characters their gifts unless they kill the Wicked Witch of the West. Hold on, what?
Bring me the broomstick of the Witch of the West.
He asks for their broomstick?
But if we do that, we'll have to kill her to get it.
Bring me her broomstick.
What's that gonna do, Mr. Oz the Great and Terrible? If this film was made today, he would have 100% asked for her head. But yeah, I don't actually think the character is different enough to warrant any more deeper analysis. But that doesn't mean that this category is over. Because one character who is completely different between the two adaptations is the Wicked Witch of the West herself. For one thing, she's not green in the book. Or tall, or dressed in all black. She doesn't have a broomstick, or a cackle, or a crystal ball. In the book, her most distinctive trait is only having one eye. That is also a telescope that allows her to see miles and miles away. She's also kinda a mild obstacle in the book. Sure, at one point she kidnaps Dorothy, and eventually she wants the shoes. And the wizard still wants her dead, but otherwise she has a little impact on the plot. Stuff that impedes the group's journey, like the poppy fields, aren't so much a trap set by the witch as complete coincidences. And she's like really easily defeated. Dorothy doesn't even melt the witch to put out the Scarecrow's fire, she just plain throws a bucket of water at her because she's mad.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
Also, why the heck does the Wicked Witch of the West just have buckets of water lying around her castle? That's a plot hole the movie just does not fill. And the Book Witch has multiple animal armies at her disposal, not just those flying monkeys. The only reason the monkeys even do her bidding is because of a magical golden hat that grants you 3 orders. The witch uses her third to capture Dorothy and company. And then later, Dorothy gets the hat to command the army, and then even later, Glinda uses it to command the army. So what I'm saying is, the Wolf Army needs more credit. Sure, they didn't actually capture Dorothy, but at least they're working for free. But okay, the movie added a lot to this character. For one thing, screen time. Unlike the book, the Wicked Witch of the West is the primary obstacle and villain of the film. She even has an analogous character back in Kansas. And in order to justify this change, the movie gives her a real reason to want the slippers that Dorothy took from the Wicked Witch of the East.
The slippers. Yes.
Unlike the original witch, who just wanted them as a magical artifact, the movie's witch feels that they are her rightful inheritance from her sister.
Give them back to me, or I'll... It's too late. There they are, and there they'll stay.
Who Dorothy dropped a house on and murdered.
Kill my sister. Who killed the Witch of the East?
I'd be angry too! In the book, none of the witches of Oz are actually related, and certainly not the Wicked Witches of the West and East. I feel like the movie adds a ton to this character by giving her this sympathetic angle. Like, no one full-on supports her intent to enslave Dorothy, but at least it's for revenge and not selfishness. So for that reason, and the actress Margaret Hamilton's incredible performance, I'm giving this point to the movie. Which brings me to our next category, world building. Because, hello, Oz is one of the great fantasy lands that gets referenced over and over and over for the last century. It's like Middle Earth or Narnia in that it's a place thousands, if not millions of kids dreamt of getting whisked off to on a magical adventure, except with less religious allegory. And Oz is enormous and super rich with lore, both developed by the original L. Frank Baum series, and then once it was public domain, the subsequent adaptations by more modern authors. But when you look at the impact building a world like this has, I think there's a key difference in what the two versions accomplished. Because obviously the book has more world building, you can just fit more information on the page than the screen. Even though it's a fairly short book and a longer film, it's easier to paint a more complete picture of what this world looks like in a few expository paragraphs than in extended clunky dialogue. The film boils down what we know about Oz into key details and information that we absolutely need to understand the story. We need to know that the Yellow Brick Road leads from Munchkin Country to the Emerald City. We don't need to know that there's also Gillikin, Winky, and Quadling Country, all ruled/enslaved by their own individual witches. But we don't need to know about the lost Princess Ozma or everything else the first book did to set up the rest of its series. The Wizard of Oz gives us a smaller, less in-depth version of Oz, but it's also left its iconic imprint on our collective memory of the franchise. For instance, so many Oz adaptations use the Wicked Witch of the West, even though she only appears in that first Oz book. Actually, Warner Brothers claims a copyright for the shade of green used on their witch's skin. So every other green version of this character is desperately jumping through hoops just to reference the design that audiences so clearly associate with this story. Even when Dorothy is left out of the story, the Wicked Witch of the West and her greenish skin often remain. And then there's the other minor aesthetic changes that the film made/added that have become iconic in their own right. You've probably heard before that the ruby red slippers were originally silver in the book. But have you ever considered how weird it is that these silver slippers only exist as a fun fact that you hold on to in case it comes up in a trivia match? Maybe there was symbolism, maybe there's a reason Frank L. Baum chose silver, but we'll probably forget because red looked so good on film. Books and movies are wildly different mediums, and sometimes what works in sweeping descriptions in a book doesn't translate well to an image. Oz, by definition, is fantastical, and 1939 wasn't exactly the golden age of film effects. Sure, this movie was groundbreaking, but there was so much more advancement to come. At the same time, this is what the Emerald City looks like in our collective mind. These are the characters that everyone recognizes. Dialogue too might be carried over from the book, but everyone remembers how it was said in the movie. No matter how dreary and gray our homes are, we people of flesh and blood would rather live here than in any other country, be it ever so beautiful. There is no place like home. Just doesn't roll off the tongue the same way. Neither does there were tigers and elephants and bears and wolves and foxes and all others in natural history. And you know, since the ending's a little different, there are no, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there,
And you were there.
So the film is iconic in sound and image, but it owes its story and characters and world to the groundwork laid in the original book. In the end, even though the film is what we all picture when we think of The Wizard of Oz, the book is what actually built the world. No adaptation has ever completely captured the simultaneously complex, but also very simple lore of the book, and certainly not The Wizard of Oz. So therefore, the winner of this round has to be the book. And finally, our final category is the message. Because both of these stories have something to say. Some of it is the same, but not necessarily all of it. But we can start with the similarities here. Both of these versions of Oz are about following your dreams. Literally. Like literally pursuing a wish until it is granted for you. But both adaptations are also very concerned with things not being quite as they seem. For instance, the wizard is not a wizard.
You're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
And he can't actually give you whatever you desire. You have to find creative solutions to your problems. You could also argue that both versions are about friendship and family and perseverance. And that murder's okay if it's just an accident.
You killed her.
I didn't mean to kill her. Really, I didn't. No, it was an accident. I didn't mean to kill anybody.
Hail to Dorothy! The Wicked Witch is dead! Hail! Hail to Dorothy!
The book is about all these things and owns them well. Like the introduction to the novel Baum wrote in 1900 says, it's a modernized fairy tale in which the wonderment and joy are retained and the heartaches and nightmares are left out. In terms of social commentary, Baum was writing during the American suffrage movement, and almost every seat of power in Oz is held by a woman. Oz in the books is a utopia with a few issues, but overall, it's escapism for children. But I think the context of world events separating the book and the film do matter here in terms of the messaging in the latter adaptation. The Wizard of Oz premiered in 1939 after a world war and during the greatest economic depression in American history, and a few years before the country joined in the Second World War. Actually, the film premiered 6 days before the Nazis invaded Poland. Suddenly, it's easier to understand why the movie decided to paint the Wicked Witch of the West as an authoritative dictator with an army of faceless goons, and why the wizard's power is meaningless when it depends on the illusion of ordained authority. This was the great cultural anxiety of the time. Even though the United States wouldn't join the other allies in World War II for another 2 years, fascism was on everyone's mind. And for even more Americans, the Great Depression was a huge deal. And wouldn't you know, Kansas, specifically farmers in Kansas, were profoundly impacted by the Dust Bowl and economic collapse in the Midwest. If Oz is such a great place, then why is Dorothy trying to get back home?
No, I'll never get home.
Stay with us then, Dorothy. We all love you.
In the book, it's because she misses her family. In the movie, perhaps it's because her family is depending on her to survive a labor crisis during a time when tornadoes and windstorms have basically rendered their land infertile. The plot of the book and movie are basically the same, but the overall cultural consciousness of the audiences experiencing both versions of the story couldn't be more different. The book works so well as escapism because it was written in a time where there wasn't as much to address. The book is concerned with an adventure. In terms of widespread literary analysis, there's a common theory that Baum was talking about America's transition away from the gold standard with the yellow brick road. The symbolism is kinda there, but you have to squint to see it. But the film doesn't have the luxury of being stretched for symbolism. It's so overtly anti-fascist and pro-getting out of the recession that its message is much more clear. Maybe too clear. You could argue that it's almost lazy how well this film works as American propaganda before it was cool, while the country was staring down the barrel of another global conflict. So maybe I'm just lazy myself, but I appreciate how that message gets laid out. I'm giving this point to the movie because it manages to take the exact same story points from the original and transform them into a call to action. Which means that our grand winner today is actually the film version of The Wizard of Oz. As always, feel free to correct me in the comment section down here, but also leave a like if you've gotten this far. You can also subscribe to our channel for more videos. We don't cover very much Wizard of Oz content, but there's something here for everyone. And you can check out our other book versus movie episodes by clicking the link in the fancy card right here. Please follow us on Twitter at 3_Central to proudly announce that fascism is a bad idea. And support us on Patreon to also denounce fascism. That stuff's really bad, guys. But because I feel reasonably confident that you all agree, I feel comfortable ending the video right here. So thanks for watching. Wicked is the best adaptation of them all, and I'll see you later.
Pay no attention to the